Hey guys, welcome to the Nate Show, and in today's episode we are going to be reading a few cartoon creepypastas that I found on Fandom, and I'm just gonna make this intro short because it's gonna take a long time to read these. So let's get started. I wish I could give you the classic, "This happened to a friend of mine." I honestly, truly do. Then I could make it a lot less gruesome in my head than it really was. Then I could doubt it like the rest of you. But even though this happened to me, even though there were witnesses, sometimes I'm not quite sure I believe it myself. It's now the wails of my now 4-year-old daughter at night that reminds me that it did indeed happen. Katie had just turned 3 a couple of weeks before the incident. One thing I loved to do was take her to the theater every few Saturday mornings for a kids presentation. Kids movie presentation. It went from old classics like Snow White to recent Pixar movies. It was fun and enjoyable, and that way Katie mingled with other kids her age that loved the same movies. At the time, Katie was literally obsessed with anything related to Toy Story. We had all 3 movies on DVD, which she watched religiously. Thank God I love those movies too, because you can get sick of watching the same thing a minimum of 5 times a day, let me tell you. And also had Woody, Buzz, and Jessie dolls, which she loved to sleep with. She was afraid of trucks by the time she turned 2, so I taught her to pull the strings on either Jessie or Woody to scare the bad trucks away in the middle of the night. Honestly, these dolls were a blessing. So when I found out Toy Story 3 was being shown at the kids' theater, I jumped on the occasion. Even though Katie had seen it countless times before, there was nothing like watching it on the big screen. I knew she'd be ecstatic. The showing was supposed to start at 8 a.m., but it didn't start until 9. It wasn't so bad, since the other kids were having fun. Some parents left frustrated, but I stuck around as about half a dozen other mothers and one father with their kids. The theater employee apologized and offered us free candy. All good. Who refuses free candy? I'll go into the cliche of stories like this and say that the movie started normally because, well, it did. The intro was the part that Katie liked the most, where Woody and Jessie chase the train and Buzz saves Woody at the last second. Actually, nothing happened for most of the showing. Once in a while, it would glitch, where the image would freeze for a second, then fast forward to catch back up with the sound. While I noticed it, the other kids didn't care, as long as they got to see their heroes in jumbo size. Nearing the end, where things got strange. It didn't seem off at first, but I would soon find out, as every other family in the theater would. There's a point in the movie where Woody and the toys end up at the dump after Lotso managed to drag Woody into a dumpster and the garbage truck picks them up. The little Pizza Planet aliens get taken away by one of the trucks in the dump, and then Woody and his friends are carried onto a conveyor belt. The moment they hit the belt, the screen flickered and the sound jammed on a constant loop with the toys screaming when they fell. And then we got to look at the well-known blue screen of death, with that awful screaming sound going on and on like a broken record. I always found a loopy jumping sound that comes with the blue screen of death disturbing. Hell, I thought that a scratchy record or a CD teeth chattering eerie. Maybe it was because I used to have a computer that crashed on me every half hour and kill my files. It made me nervous, but when the father burst into mocking laughter, I uttered a nervous laugh too. The kids were confused, but for those who had just enough of knowledge of computers, it was really funny. I had a friend who worked at this theater, and he quit for another job around the time computers replaced people in the cabins projecting the films. I guess nothing will ever replace a good old human being. When nobody came to check on us, the father got up and left to ask to turn that thing off or restart it. Katie didn't seem fazed by this and shrugged it off, waiting patiently. She was always smart and mature, knowing she could always watch it at home anyway. A little boy was crying and the mother had to leave when the sound became ridiculously loud. It wasn't constant, the screaming sound, you see. It was lowered to a near whisper and became loud enough to make my head buzz. At some point, Katie gave me a worried look and clasped her hands over her ears. Before I made the final decision to leave, however, the screen went black and the employee returned with the father and flashlight, apologizing and let us know that they would resume the movie shortly. Apparently, they had been having equipment problems all morning. Shortly after the projector came back to life, the movie resumed a few minutes prior to the crash, only to crash at the same exact very spot. A second time. Blue screen of death. Again. By then, the father and I were laughing. Don't get me wrong, we only paid $5 fees for the entrance, but that was getting ridiculous. Seriously? The father exclaimed. This time, no one had to go get any employee. The screen flickered back on and the movie started where it almost left off immediately with a loud click coming from the cabin up above me. It reminded me of a gun as it clicked the safety off, and I couldn't help but look up at the beam of light. It might be an employee kicking the machine in gear for all I knew. As long as it worked, I wasn't going to complain. But come to this point, another mishap, and I was gone. Watching it at home was a whole lot less troublesome. The movie seemed fine come to this point, except for the sound. Like someone had put a pillow over the speakers to muffle it. Something else was odd, but I didn't notice it until Lotso betrayed the toys by not pressing the stop button of the belt and let them fall into the incinerator. It was their voices. Their voices were different, not by a whole lot. Maybe the kids didn't notice, but I did. And I know the father did too, because we exchanged curious glances. They were similar, but Woody's, for example, clearly wasn't voiced by Tom Hanks anymore. It was around the time that I felt something was really wrong. My stomach clenched painfully, and I felt my heart beat the drum roll. There was no reason for it. I had no explanation for the voices being different. Only the differences didn't just end there. If you had seen this movie as many times as I have, you know that the toys eventually give up and accept their fate by holding hands and waiting for their death. A light comes on and Giant Claw hauls them out of the incinerator at the very last second. Keeps you on edge the first time, but once you've seen it, you know better. Except I didn't know better anymore. The animation was fluid, but by now it wasn't right. Have you ever watched those old 1930s cartoons like Betty Boop where everything is always moving and never stops? A few years later, they figured out that it was more natural to have stop animations because that's how we work. We didn't notice it, but we stop between motions. Grab a cup of coffee, stop. Bring it to lips, stop. Chug it down, stop. Put it back down, stop. It was subtle, but it made all the difference in animation when they realized that things started looking a whole lot less psychedelic from the moment on. Well, the animation on the big screen didn't stop moving like those old cartoons. There was no stopping in between actions and motions. Like, they sort of danced around everything in some way or another. And let me tell you, if you thought it looked psychedelic with 30s hand-drawn animation, computer animation makes it look twice as disturbing. That clearly was not the movie I had at home. And it wasn't like the rest of the movies we'd watched to this point either. I noted the father looking at me again, and I shrugged. I didn't have any more of an explanation than he did. I suppose I remained seated out of gross curiosity. As the saying goes, it's like watching a train wreck, and no matter how horrible it is, you just can't look away. There was none of the dramatic music I was used to hearing. In fact, there was no music at all. Maybe if it just wasn't necessary. Imaging was enough. Already, I felt a lump in my throat just watching the animation. I couldn't move, nailed to my seat. The claw saving the toys never came down. There was no heavenly light before our last-minute rescue. There was no rescue. The toys screamed and screamed and screamed. An ear-shattering screech that would ring in for my head for days to come and would wake me up in the middle of the night. The toys held hands, which shrank as the plastic melted in the thick flesh-colored goo. I remember Woody's face the most because this is what the screen mainly focused on as they advanced toward the fiery pit in the middle. Black bubbles popped first in his cheeks, and then his gaping mouth opened wider than it was humanly possible, his lips stretching to wretched lengths until his whole jaw melted off at the hinges, leaving long, thick streaks of burning plastic behind. I was reminded of the way that cheese strings when warm and melted, which forced a completely insane bout of laughter out of me. Cheese and plastic? What the fuck was I even looking at? The banshee was screeching, escalated, and with all the speakers all around us, it came from everywhere at once. My stomach cramped as despair ripped through me, and I thought that I would collapse right there. I couldn't move, glued to my seat. Woody's eyes rolled down his cheeks like they weren't painted, but were they real globes of glandular substance which burst into egg yolks, leaving gaping holes and place. Their eyes, all of their eyes, were the only thing that acted like as the real eyes might, not like plastic or fabric. Later, I realized why. Eyes are the mirror of the soul. Eyes, even if they looked painted, are always real. Always. And so they exploded into liquid state, so did their souls. Burning in the fiery pits of hell, it's silly to think that way of a cartoon character. But it's the only explanation I found for the difference. I'm not sure it makes me feel any better to think that way. Actually, it just makes me feel a lot worse. Woody's hat had melted over his head and shaped it unnaturally, and with it, the fabric of his clothes caught fire in one burst. It crackled like some demonic laughter, burst into sparks, convulsing back. Except he didn't go far because his hands refused to slinky and buzz his hands. The screaming was like the sound of pure hell, like something from a demon. The voices, though wrong, had sounded human until now. I felt a sharp cramp in my hands because I had been holding onto the arms of my seat as though they were my lifeline. In some way, they were. The action kept me grounded because a part of me feared I'd end up in that pit and melted off as well if I didn't keep some of myself in this reality. Most of the footage were focused on Woody, but you got a glimpse of the others too. Toys like Buzz and Rex, toys that were made exclusively of plastic, melted quickly in disturbingly colorful goo. There was no blood, just plastic melting and molding itself off and bursting into flames. It was horrible and graphic. Maybe it's because you get to know these characters so well that you feel them alive despite the fact they are toys or cartoons. You don't even need blood and organs spilled. You just need to see their suffering. So deep you feel it too. I even felt my skin start to prick and burn in response. I should have gotten out sooner. Take Katie with me to spare her. It was a mistake on my part not to. I will regret it for the rest of my life. The screeching turns to wails. I was able to come out of my trance long enough to realize that the sound of crying and screaming did not come from the speakers anymore, but the people around me. There was nothing but the sound of crackling fire from the pit around us now. The toys were dead, but the children and adults alike, myself included, were the ones screaming and weeping. With a sudden burst of strength, I grabbed Katie in my arms and ran out of the theater. I didn't look back, and I could now smell the burning plastic. It wasn't just stuck in my nose. It clung to my clothes and skin, too. I thought I heard someone vomit behind me. I'm surprised I didn't. I noted the father had scurried past me. Then again, he might have been smarter than me and left before I did. He was yelling at the employee who stood giving tickets. The poor kid didn't seem to get what he was saying. He seemed overwhelmed by the screaming and crying. Soon enough, the small crowd of parents were surrounding him. Things were getting violent, and the kid had to escape. Me? I just stood there with Katie screaming in my arms, half hearing her still in shock. I felt lost. I didn't know what to do or where to go. Should I go home, join the mob of angry parents of wailing children, go into the police? What? My feet moved on their own. I let my instincts take over. The door. I was leaving. It was better for Katie anyway, to keep her away from this place. I felt empty, and the smell of burnt plastic seemed even stronger as I stepped outside. When a hand gripped my arm, I jumped and yelled. It was the father with the child in his arm, sobbing in his shoulder. Turned out his name was Jeremy. We exchanged phone numbers after he told me he would see to it that I get an explanation of what happened. The rest of the day did not go well. I took 2 baths with Katie, but the death stench wouldn't leave. Eventually, she stopped crying and fell asleep out of pure exhaustion. As for me, though, even though I was completely off, even though I felt like I could fall asleep too, I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the lifelike eyes of Woody slip down his cheeks and burst, or his jaw hanging loose until it crashed on his lap. Just before my husband came home from work, I got a call from Jeremy. I remember slumping down on my chair as he spoke, and a new set of hot tears streamed down my cheeks. My head hurt and my eyes burned. I thought they might pop right out, too. Jeremy said that the theater's management took the remaining few parents to see the computer that handled the projection version of the movie in the first place. But the streaming led to nowhere. Jeremy's job was to handle computers, so he was able to look through it for those who couldn't. He tried tracing back what the streaming had come and the virus, but there was no lead to follow. Either the prankster was an employee and had set up the virus from the computer itself, had covered his tracks very well, or something very, very wrong in this picture. I preferred a rational explanation to the something of outer nature, so I opt to believe it was an employee who had access to the computer. Either way, other than the corrupted files the virus had left behind, there was no evidence of the disturbing footage we watched. It was gone. There was a little more to it. Anything related to Toy Story has left my house. My husband, he wants to believe us, but I can tell he's skeptical. He says someone has to animate the thing, and people have to act out the voices. It takes a lot of dedication because while the animation was constantly moving, the quality of the images and characters was as good as the original movies. He said that it's one hell of an effort to put in a one-time prank. He's right, though. I never heard anything of the sort again. You'd think that it would come out if it had. I checked, though, and Jeremy did too. There was no records of it, like it anywhere. Jeremy even tried to contact Disney and Pixar, but they never returned his calls or emails as expected. The theater's closed now. I think someone sued them over what happened, but all the news mentioned was bankruptcy. To this day, I still get a whiff of burning plastic once in a while when Katie screams in the middle of the night, suffering from those horrible nightmares. Hi, my name is Kimberly Wolf. As I am a mom, I'm really careful of what my children watch. I have two little girls. Gabby is 4 years old and my Josie is 18 months. Before I had Josie, I banned Dora the Explorer in my house. This might sound silly because you might be telling yourself, isn't Dora the Explorer supposed to be a kids show? Yes, it is, but I banned it from an experience that I will never forget. It was around Christmas of 2013 and Gabby was 2 years old. She usually liked Disney Junior, which had Doc Stuffins and Sophia the First, her two favorite shows. Almost every day, though, she would turn to Nick Jr. and watch Dora when her favorite shows weren't on. Since she watched Dora on a daily basis, I probably thought that she would like a Dora DVD. Since my husband was home and I wanted to be quick, I decided to go to the Cumberland Farms. If you don't know about this chain, it's a convenience store from one of the nearest to me, has a DVD rack. I filed through the DVDs until I finally found one. It had a normal cover which said Dora the Explorer Map Adventures. What I learned was the cover was normal, but the DVD wasn't. On Christmas Eve, we had our Christmas party we have every year. We opened our presents. Gabby got the Dora DVD I got for her. She thanked me for it, but she didn't watch it until Christmas Day. So now Gabby had all her presents from Santa Claus open. I think it was before dinner she watched it. She had her own DVD player for her TV. So I popped the DVD in the player and left her to watch it. When she came out of her room, she said, "Mommy, Daddy, Dora's scary. I don't want to see her." As my husband always has to assume everything he says is right, he unsurprisingly said, "Honey, it was probably nothing." But I could see in her eyes. She looked pale like snow. Her eyes were very tired. Her lips were dry. She looked exactly like she had a fever. I told her, "Don't worry, Gabby. There's nothing to be scared about. Lay in bed and rest for a while." But there was something to be scared about. Dora's real life. I took the DVD out of the DVD player and sent Gabby to bed. I wondered, what's so bad about this DVD that says Map Adventures? Well, I was about to find out. At 10 p.m., it came to my conclusion to test the video, even though I considered smashing it into bits for a while. But anyway, I found a portable DVD player I got on eBay and put the DVD in there. But before I did, actually, I examined the DVD. It was a DVD that you used to record things with or burn other videos on. Why is this not a Dora DVD? I whispered to myself. Anyway, I put it in the player. The DVD started and showed the Paramount logo. The difference was it had that fanfare instead of being silent, as the DVD logo was. I liked to hum the fanfare, so I did. But it seemed to get off key at the end. That was creepy, I thought anyway. It had the Nick Jr. logo, which made me jump. Guess what? The orange Nick was beating the blue Jr. mercilessly. Who in their dirty minds would do this? Did they think that this in child abuse was a joke? The theme song started playing. It was the theme in the earlier episodes, but with many changes. The song sounded perfectly fine, but here are all the changes. The French doors were brown and opened with a creaking noise. The arts and crafts table had a sign saying some Spanish language, but I'm going to read the English part. I have no one to talk to. Help me. The room was dimly lit. The orange cushion was replaced with some kind of dark shadow, and lastly, the computer was an old white 1990s computer instead of a green one. The Dora computer had Nobody except Dora, which made me feel uneasy. Then, when it showed the logo, Dora looked depressed. She pretended to smile, but her eyes told everything, almost like the expression of someone about to hang his or herself. The episode started with a text saying, Margarita Maza de Chorizo Chipanchico Guerrero, Mexico. It featured an orange, the Mediterranean-looking home, which I assumed was Dora's. It seemed rusted and boarded up. It had toys scattered everywhere. It zoomed into a front window, featured a messy bedroom with chipped wallpaper. The bed had an unkempt Dora with ratty hair. She woke up and said, "Hola, so Dora." Then she pulled out a small monkey resembling Boots and said, "And I'm Boots." Boots was actually a stuffed animal? Dora continued on. "I need your help. Will you help me find something to do?" "You will? Come on, vamonos. Let's go." Then she got downstairs and she told her parents she was exploring, but they weren't answering. Dora just continued and said, "I think I know where we can go, Boots." "Where? To the big city?" "But Dora, how do we get to the big city? Let's stop and think. Who do we ask for help when we don't know which way to go?" "Say map, say map." Dora pulled out a scribbled on piece of paper, and Dora imitated map, saying, "We have to cross the troll bridge, go into the spooky forest, and then finally into the big city." Then, as usual, Map told me to say it with him. Just like regular, Dora then repeated the destinations, and when she said "Vámonos," she also whispered, "Señor, purve," I don't know what that says. "Lord, please help me change this world. Amen." Dora walks for a few yards, then stops to ask where the troll bridge is. Although there is no bridge in sight, she randomly goes to a path and says, "Gracias and vámonos." She sings her "Where Are We Going" song while walking down a hill. She randomly stops and said, "We made it to the troll bridge." Suddenly, a homeless man is on the screen with Dora. He looks in his mid-50s, very filthy and long, fuzzy beard. He then says, "Dora, do you have some money?" Dora then beams and says, "Hola, grumpy old troll, what is your riddle?" The man then says, "What the hell are you saying, little girl? Why do you have to do this every day?" Dora is obviously confused and says, "Thank you for letting me over the bridge, grumpy old troll." The man then says, "Burn in hell, bitch." Then Dora asks where the spooky forest is. Thank you, says Vamonos, and then sings. This is when things get worse. The streets get more polluted, and you can see more graffiti and gangs. Dora stops and says, "We made it to the spooky forest. Be careful, there can be spooky bats and witches." Suddenly, a man dressed up as Swiper came up and said, "Get out of my freaking way, or I'll cut your throat and burn your family." Dora said, very scared, "Swiper, no swiping, Swiper." Swiper then shoved Dora, and her Boots doll was sent flying. Dora's knees were gushing blood from scraping on the concrete, and Boots had a tear in him. Dora mimicked Boots saying "ouch" and said that she needed backpack to help Boots. She got her purple backpack and said all the things backpack says. Backpack would get a bandage and said, "Yum, yum, 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 yum. Delicious." After that little strip of conflict, Dora said, "Mi sentio tan solo, Deborah." I don't know what that says. "I feel so alone. Should I end it? What is life?" She started to tear up and silently cry while walking to the big city. While she finally got to the big city, she was extremely worn out. Her eyes were red from crying. She had blisters on her knees from Swiper's attack, and her Boots doll was dirtier. She said in a depressed voice, "We made it to the big city. We did it." Boots tried to sing her usually trademark "We Did It" song, but miserably failed due to depression. She said, "What was your favorite part?" "I didn't like any parts," I thought to myself. Dora then walks up to the screen and says, "I need to confess. Your adventures with me were never true. Boots was my stuffed animal all my life. The troll is a homeless man who begs for money, not riddles. Swiper's a man who wants to kill me, and all the others were never real. I never had friends. I had to make up my own. So I found you guys. We did everything until now. I can't explore with you guys anymore. I'm sorry. I couldn't have done it making friends without you. Thanks for helping." The screen stays black for a while. I was about to eject the DVD until the screen faded and read 3 days later. It faded to the forest. It revealed to be that one tree that you can clearly see a decayed Dora with intestines dangled and grotesquely real fashion, blue-covered fingers, gouged out eyes, and other distinguishedly fit real features. The Boots doll was near the tree. He had many rips in his fabric, and stuffing was popping out. A note on the tree said, El Señor... I'm going to read the English part. The Lord has saved me from this bad death hell of a place, which was a suicide. Suicide is your escape. The picture got more distorted until the scene changed to a newscast saying, earlier this week, a 7-year-old girl named Dora Marquez was found on a noose in a forest in coastal Mexico, revealing to have committed suicide. Beside her was her stuffed monkey and suicide note. She was star of the beloved children's show Dora the Explorer. We all miss her dearly in our hearts. The screen then zoomed out from the beginning computer. The computer turned on by itself, and the camera panned and revealed a coffin behind the computer. The camera zoomed out where the earlier shadow was now and is where the Boots doll is. A bony hand grabbed the sign from earlier and took it off the screen. The doors then closed, and the hand with the sign came back and with a sign that said, "Suicide is your escape." The words echoed in my mind. The screen faded to black, and that was it. I kept the DVD in my closet and still keep it there to the day so that my 2 children do not see it. But anyway, I burnt the video onto my computer and entered Viacom and emailed Viacom saying I can't inhumane to make an animation like that out of a children's cartoon. I also attached the video to an email. They actually told me that they made it in 2003 because they were having secret plans to make it into an adult party cartoon like Ren and Stimpy's Fate. But it got canceled due to negative responses from test viewers that made me ban Dora from my children. So now you already know. I finally banned Dora the Explorer in my house, all because of Dora's real life. I'm sure we all heard of the infamous Squidward's suicide. Well, I'm going to have to give you some background the original story does not mention. The episode first appeared in 2002, which was when it was aired across the world on Monday, July 1st, 2002 at 3 a.m. GMT. Thousands of children were left weeping and shaking, traumatized for life. On the other hand, this isn't the only time it's been played. Between 2002 and 2015, it's played late at night approximately 3 times a year, scarring children for life every single time. Children would be left convulsing violently and vomiting over themselves. Enraged parents would call in demanding that they shut down the channel immediately. But because it wasn't the episode log, Nickelodeon just assumed it was a silly prank from kids pointing out a voice. Nickelodeon employees were even told to slam the phone down on any calls mentioning Squidward's suicide. Nickelodeon keeps an episode log of every episode that is played on Nick so that they can either prove or disapprove of any allegations of inappropriate content being aired. Episodes automatically added that are as they always are aired. However, Squidward's suicide never once appeared in the episode log for unknown reasons. The episode became known to Nickelodeon on the night of Friday, October 21st, 2005, which was sent to Nickelodeon employees as the supposed premiere of Season 4. The tape was quickly incinerated, and Nickelodeon thought they'd seen the last of it. However, it continued to play on Nick unbeknown to Viacom. I bet you're asking why Nick doesn't catch on after... This is because Nick gets hundreds of prank calls about non-existent episodes. The most recent joke being Timmy hangs himself, which purports to be a fake episode of The Fairly Odd Parents. I guess Nick assumed that the version of the episode they saw was part of a sick joke. It was played for the last time on the 4th of November on November of 2015, which had the exact same effect as all the other showings of it. After it had played for the last time, any evidence of the episode was completely wiped away. Camcorders, laptops, and phones with footage of the episode went up in flames and leaked acid from the battery compartment, rendering them completely unusable. After the very last showing, it believed that we'd seen the last of any Squidward suicide and we could get on with our lives completely fearless. How I wish this was true. On Tuesday, January 5th, 2016, the original Squidward Suicide was replaced by Squidward Suicide 2, a direct sequel of the original Squidward Suicide. It played on Nickelodeon at approximately 2 a.m. GMT, I think, where a handful of unlucky people witnessed it. I was one of those unlucky people. It was a cold winter's night. In fact, so cold that there was a thin sheet of frost on my window. Rain tapped softly against my frostbitten window as I snored cozily, unaware of the horrors I was about to experience. I woke up from a nightmare with the start. A nightmare was so horrific I was lying drenched in my own sickly sweat and panting my lungs out. However, looking back on it, the nightmare was nothing compared to what I saw that night. The very first thing I noticed upon waking up is that I felt sick to the stomach. It had been New Year's Eve 4 days ago before, and let me tell you, it had been a hell of a wild night. I'd even ended up with my boyfriend's lampshade on my head at one point, but that's a completely different story. And I still hadn't recovered from the wildness of seeing the new year in. I grunted and turned to look at my alarm clock. The room had a dark crimson glow to it, which was coming from my alarm. It read 1:30 a.m. It was far too early to get up. I rolled back over and tried to get my sleep, but my tummy was too painful for me to even begin to try to go back to sleep. After 30 futile minutes, I gave up on the ghost and decided to pad downstairs. I rolled out of bed and proceeded to step out of my room and step into my living room. The living room was pitch black and freezing cold. I swear I could hear moaning in the darkness. I felt as if I was being watched and judged. Every single move I made, something somewhere was following them with its gigantic eyes. Maybe I've just gone mad. I certainly feel sick up in the head. Now, if I could go back and change anything that I've ever done, it would be what I did next. I rush in and scream, "No, don't! Read a book, go on a computer, or write a poem. Just anything except that." I stepped gingerly towards the TV and pressed the on button. Fancying watching some trashy late-night talk show. The TV whirled to life and flickered a few times. It always does when finding the network. It finally connected to the network and sprang to life. The channel switched to Nickelodeon. No, I don't want to watch Nick by myself. My little sister was over and wanted to watch Sam and the Cat, so I switched it on over to her for her. But I was about to switch over, but as I reached for the TV remote, a large announcement came on that stopped me in my tracks. "Now haven't we got a treat for you tonight?" A deep voice loud boomed out. This caught me completely off guard. My hands jolted and the remote hit the ground with a deafening thud and shattered into a million pieces into my dark red carpet. Brand spanking new SpongeBob special, especially for you. The threatening voice blurted out. I must admit, my interest was piqued. I was a massive SpongeBob fan as a child, and the idea of seeing a brand new SpongeBob special sounded like heaven to me. I slouched down on my frayed and cracked sofa and got ready for the night events to unfold right in front of me. The screen went black for a few uncertain seconds, and the episode began. The SpongeBob intro played as usual, but it seemed off somehow. The tune was distorted, and the background animation had a dark shadow cast upon it. This sent chills shooting down my spine. I didn't even know how, but it was at the exact moment I knew something was very off about this episode. Nevertheless, I pushed on, and it was just a normal SpongeBob. It was just praying that it was just a normal SpongeBob episode. The intro ended with Squidward appearing instead of SpongeBob. He wrapped his nose around the clarinet and pretended to make a high-pitched, squealing noise that set my teeth right on edge. He then turned and looked at me straight in the eye, gave me a sadistic, twisted smile before fading into blackness. The screen then fades into loud static for a few seconds before jumping to the title card. The title card was deep and crimson color with the splashes of lighter red appearing on it. It looked like someone had been slaughtered right in front of it and blood had been left to dry and became crumbly. In dripping dark back letters, the title read, Squidward's Suicide Part 2. No, I said, paralyzed by terror. I wanted to turn back. I really did. However, I knew I couldn't. I had to know what would come next. It was just something that I couldn't turn down, no matter how much I should have. The episode began with Squidward lying on his bed with the top of his head torn clean off, the brain matter and crimson blood leaking out of the infected wound, dripping onto his now soggy bed sheets. Suddenly, the pupils of his eye began to race in his head in a wild and unpredictable manner, all the time getting faster and faster until they stopped, and Squidward let out a deep, pain-filled scream. The camera slowly panned off of Squidward when it was completely above him. The screen twitched and began to show a completely different scene. The scene showed Squidward against a gray, empty background. Below it, dark whispers of spine-chilling clarinet playing could be heard. Squidward was standing there, in his eyes. A deep feeling of terror was expressed. He was all alone. He started to take a few nervous steps towards the right. Completely unsure of himself, he continued to walk, picking up the pace until he was finally sprinting. Whining in complete and utter terror, he continued to run until he came upon a house in the dark, dim wasteland. The house was stone gray and threateningly tall. The sign outside said in carved crimson letters, "The Bleed Household." Squidward took a few seconds to analyze the house, then recoiled in abject terror. Gotta be another house somewhere. Squidward panicked in a crazed manner. Please, please, please! He ran for miles and miles to no avail. He was completely alone. No, I can't go in there, Squidward yelled in fright. He flopped to the ground in an earth-shattering thud. He began to weep, thick, bloody tears dripping down his pain-stretched face. Now, usually in SpongeBob, when a character cries, the resulting noise is done in a humorous manner. This wasn't. This sounded like an actual human howling. The noise was filled with bursting with pain and suffering. I felt like crying along with him. Next, a horrific time-lapse of Squidward starving was shown. At first, it wasn't so bad. Squidward was getting skinnier and skinnier. It soon became terrifying. His ribs were showing, looking fit to burst straight out of his malnourished skin, and veins began to push out in a painful manner. So close to the surface, you could see his blue blood circulating through his broken body. It looked so realistic, almost like a real person starving. Squidward weakly clammed onto his feet, realizing he was going to die soon if he didn't eat. He stepped gladly towards the threatening house, shaking more with every step. He reached the blood-soaked door and proceeded to knock on it. A female squid with dead, peeling skin and bloodshot eyes opened the door. When she cast her poor eyes on poor Squidward, her face exploded with rage. What do you want? Go away, you stupid head. Must eat now, he whimpered, holding his stomach. I need you to do a solid if you think you're touching a crumb of my food. She handed him a blood-stained meat cleaver. My dumb son is in his room. End him. What? No, I can't. I really can't. Squidward cried. Fine then. Die and rot for all I care. Okay, he whispered. He slumped into the tiny squid's room, hanging his head. He began to weep softly. Following him was the sadistic she-devil. What's up, bro? The mini squid said, completely unaware of the pain he was about to endure. I'm sorry, Squidward said. I really am. Squidward grabbed the hold of the small boy and held him fiercely against the bed he used to sleep in. He grabbed the poor kid's arm and snapped it into the thick flow of crimson blood poured from it, and stretched veins were exposed. The child cried out in pain, screaming to be left be. But Squidward was deaf to this. Squidward then pinned the kid down to his bed and drove the knife straight into his stomach and pulled it out again. Blood sprayed around the jagged wound, coating the wall behind them. A crimson-coated Squidward grabbed hold of the kid's neck and with a firm pull snapped it in two. The tiny boy went completely silent. He was gone. To confirm the kill, he saw the little squid's head off. Blood splattering all over the room, and Squidward. His head fell to the floor, lifeless and cold. Eyes that had once held happiness, tears, and fear were now completely blank. Squidward took a few steps back, then began to howl in pain. He flopped onto the floor and wept loudly, covering his eyes with the tentacles. Crimson tears began dribbling down his face. I took that poor boy's life, and for what? A piece of toast? He pounded with the floor with his real rage-fueled fist. Well done, the cold-hearted woman said, throwing Squidward a few Twinkies. You monster, he yelled. I'll never forgive you. He stuffed the Twinkies in his mouth, hungrily as he wept all over the blood-soaked carpet. Squidward, can you hear me? A soft voice whispered over the top of it. Squidward opened his pain-filled eyes. He was sitting on the bright white hospital. A soft beeping noise could be heard in the background. I was so relieved that he was okay. Standing in front of him was the same fear-inducing woman that appeared in his nightmare. It's okay, she said softly. Suddenly a sadistic look crossed her eyes. She had a pair of blood-spattered surgical scissors and plunged them right into Squidward's weak heart as she laughed maniacally. A meany bloody squelch could then be heard as the scissors went deeper and deeper, doing even more damage with every inch. When they wouldn't go any further, the woman jolted the scissors open, and crimson blood and muscle tissue splashed all over the screen, covering it completely. After this, the episode faded to static before ending abruptly. I wish I could erase the memories I have of that Squidward episode out of my mind. Sadly, I don't think I'll ever forget. Every night I have petrifying nightmares which leaves me panting, drenched in sweat. The thing that stuck with me the most, though, was how forlorn Squidward looked after he slaughtered that innocent boy, and how he had no choice but to perform that sickening act. The episode is still in circulation, so I'm begging you, if you turn on Nick and they announce a special's coming on next, switch off the TV and run as fast as you can. Even 14 years after this horror began, no one knows what is behind Squidward's suicide, and to be honest with you, I doubt we will ever know. Alright guys, as you can see, I just read all of those, and it took me like an hour and a half to read all of them and to edit all of them. I would like to say I'm sorry for the ear rape warnings. It's because I've been trying to, I have to cuss while I'm reading the stories, so I have to bleep out anything that's cuss related or anything. So make sure you guys subscribe, hit the like button, and make sure you hit the notification bell, and you'll get notified for every video that I put up. So, bye-bye, guys.